Leadership isn't about what you know, it's about how you behave when the pressure is on. Our guest today specializes in power skills, the essential behaviors that drive business results. You're tuning in to the Adapt AI podcast series, Spotlight series, where we feature the change makers and disruptors shaping the future and growth of business. I am your host, Haley. Our guest today is a veteran of the leadership and development industry and the founder and managing director of Schwartz and Associates. Please welcome Evan Unger.
Ellie,
Evan,
thank you
welcome.
for it is great to have you be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. To get us started, would you mind giving us a brief background on your journey? How does a self-proclaimed introvert end up commanding the room as a corporate trainer?
Well, I go back a little further than you do, Haley. So I
Okay.
got out of business school in 1989. So I go back a ways. I went and worked for Merck, a giant pharmaceutical company, and they had a rotational assignment for MBAs, like what I was doing. Then they just made up this job called the Director of Change Leadership and Development. In all honesty, it was a fancy title for I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like 3 years out of business school. A new CEO comes on board from outside of pharma. He does his assessment, like any new CEO would do, and he's not happy because it's bureaucratic, siloed. People aren't collaborating. Somehow, as a junior executive, it rolls down to me to get people to collaborate. I'm like, get people to collaborate. I just got out of business school. I don't know how to do anything. So I did what any young enterprising person did. I hired an outside consultant. That's who I work for now. We're this tiny Denver-based consulting firm. What we've done for over 30 years is support small to medium-sized businesses and smaller chunks of larger enterprises in cultural transformation. Now, very practically, what does that mean? It means we are facilitating a lot of complex collaborative workshops, right? Often multi-day decision-making, planning, visioning, process redesign meetings. And then
Mhm.
as part of those interventions, we were also always training the change agents in this style of leadership that we now call collaborative leadership. But it's really trying to teach people the skills you need to facilitate group process dynamics. So anyway, that's how I got here. Long-winded answer as I am.
Well, thank you for giving us a snapshot of that. And since you've been consulting with different sizes of organizations, what have you seen to be like the biggest challenges that they faced along the way when it comes to driving meaningful change, especially with
Well,
helping the change agents within the organization?
yeah, I mean, look, I've asked clients for over 30 years two questions, right? How many meetings are going to take place in your organization today? And that's obviously based on the size of the organization. So Merck, when I was there, they had 75,000 people. So in a single day, when you think of the one-on-ones, I suspect they run 200,000 plus meetings in a single day.
Wow. Mhm.
Larger companies, right, obviously could run a million meetings in a single day. But that's the first question I've asked for 30 years. The
Mm.
second question, which has always been fascinating to me, is how would you say the average effectiveness is of a typical meeting you attend? And I've asked that question, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 times in 30 years. I'd say 90% of the time people say 50% or lower,
Mm.
which is always stunning to me because no one ever does the math on how much time you spend in meetings. Most senior people spend at least 50% of their time in meetings. Many of them tell me they spend 110% of the time in in meetings. But if they're only spending 50% of their time in meetings, they are
Mhm.
going to literally spend a year's worth of their life in hours in meetings in
Mm.
under 9 years.
Mhm.
This is the fundamental productivity loss that organizations don't face. Now, when we did cultural transformation work, we would always do lots of different interventions. The easy stuff was to work with the C team and rip out the bureaucracy, unnecessary reports, unnecessary policies, unnecessary approval levels,
Mhm.
the simple stuff. And then there are
Trimming the
unnecessary
fat.
meetings, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the easy stuff. But we would always focus on changing leadership at the core level of facilitating high stakes decision making meetings because that's where the culture of an organization forms. Have you ever read Patrick Lencioni's The Five Dysfunctions of Teams by chance? Haley, is that book ever? So
No.
his
But I'll
first
take
book,
notes.
yeah, yeah. Well, Patrick Lencioni's first book, Death by Meeting. had a great quote in there, right? He said, bad meetings almost always lead to bad decisions, which is a recipe for mediocrity. It's a
Hmm.
recipe for bad decisions. It's a recipe for morale cratering in an organization. It's a recipe for productivity loss, and it's a recipe for something else.
Right.
If I'm that leader running those 50% or less effective meetings, it is a recipe for people seeing me as a bad leader. Because
Hmm.
people, they don't hate meetings. What we know they hate is wasting time. And
Yeah.
so many meetings are a waste of time. Now, we would intervene at the level of the meeting because in Lencioni's more recent book, uh, The Advantage, he talks about how central meetings are to the health of an organization. It's where the major decisions are going to get made. It's where the values of an organization either manifest or don't manifest.
Right.
So if you change the culture of facilitating high stakes, complex collaborative meetings, the meetings that have to go well, you get at the root of changing the culture of performance of the organization. And that's why we've always focused there for 33 plus years now.
And what would you say are the common mistakes that you've seen these leaders or meeting facilitators make when it comes to engaging or having a more collaborative, empowered meetings? Like,
Yeah. Oh, keep going. Finish that because there's yeah,
yeah, because
there's
also I was thinking, how can one determine or that, this is not really going anywhere.
yeah.
Like this could have been an email instead of a meeting. What are some
Well,
samples that you've seen over the
well,
years?
I mean, you're hitting right at the biggest mistake is they have a meeting and they're not clear why they're having a meeting. Now, we teach people many things, and we run a 4-day program to teach high stakes collaborative facilitation. But one of the simplest things, you can use the metaphor of a plane flight, right? You're in Ireland, I'm in Denver, Colorado. So what am I going to fly into Dublin to visit you? If I was to come to visit you, what was the major airport that I'd fly into? Is it Dublin?
Dublin, yeah.
Okay. So think about a project, a task force, a consulting engagement, a workshop, or a complex meeting. It always has three parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was on a flight yesterday. I time it every time, right? The first part of the flight is takeoff. From
Mm-hmm.
the time they hit the jets, when you're out on the tarmac, the wheels up, it's usually about 42 seconds, plus or minus 3 seconds, right? If that does not go well, we're all dead. It's over, right? And it's the same principle in a high stakes workshop, consulting engagement, project I'm leading, meeting. If we don't take off well, we're in big, big trouble. We're about to have, a plane crash, metaphorically, in the meeting, the project, the task force. So we teach a very simple model. It all this sounds so intuitively obvious, and it is. We call it the Popper model, right? And it's just an acronym. Popper stands for the first P is the purpose, the second O is the objectives, the third is the P for the process, the R are the roles, and the A are the agreements. Very simple model.
Mm-hmm.
But most people shouldn't be allowed to have a meeting because they haven't gotten clear why are we having the meeting and what are we trying to get done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't know, I'm trying to get to Dublin, I'm going to end over in Heathrow, right? I'm going to bounce off other people's objectives for my meeting, other people's agendas.
Yeah.
So what the mistake people make is they don't do the due diligence before the meeting to get clear why they're having the meeting, what they're doing. And if they don't know that, they can't design a good flight plan or process. They
Right.
can't think clearly about who should be in the meeting,
Right.
who shouldn't be in the meeting if I don't know the destination. And there are plenty of people who shouldn't be in the meeting, right? Because they don't have a real role to play there.
Yeah.
And then we have agreements, right? The fifth question in the Popper model, which is how should we interact from a human dynamic standpoint to be functional?
Mm-hmm.
That is my job as a great leader to be locked in on that Popper for the meeting. And if I don't have it, I shouldn't be allowed to have a meeting. And frankly, if someone invites you to a meeting and they can't tell you why you're having the meeting, what you're trying to get done, show you an agenda and tell you your role there, why are you going to their meeting? Right? They're guaranteed to waste your time. So that's the first mistake. Most meetings shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say about what are your thoughts on, some managers who would just do impromptus, ad hoc meetings, could be like urgent, but not really that important. Like, how should that be best managed or dealt with? Or,
Well,
you
yeah.
know, mm,
Look, there are urgent meetings that we can't plan for. But
mm,
the same principle applies rather than trying to fly the plane, just get everyone on the call, on the Zoom, in the Microsoft Teams video and start yammering and talking. The first thing, since they didn't do it ahead of time, should have a quick conversation. Why are we having the call? Let me give you some context so they're clear on the big picture.
mhm,
Second thing they should do is say, all right, what are we trying to get done? Are we trying to make a decision? Are we trying to fix a customer complaint? Are we trying to come up with a list of recommendations to go back to management with? But just take the time to get clear why you're doing things, what you're doing in the meeting,
mhm.
right? Since, there's going to be crises. Now, as you're skillful, if you know the destination, you're able to put together a quick agenda on the fly and some tools and techniques. And we're teaching people a lot of these tools and techniques, right? And one of the roles that needs to be made explicit for people, who's deciding, right? We go into so many meetings, it's totally unclear who's deciding, who the
Right.
ultimate decision maker is. Now, I'm working with a pharmaceutical client. We've trained their entire 90-person PMO. We've been running a lot of sessions. They have a culture of what they call SPATM, specific, actionable, decision makers. Like who
Mhm,
is the person who's specifically on point for the decision? You have to know that
mhm.
ideally before you go to the meeting. Otherwise, what happens is we go around and around, we hit turbulence. Some difficult person keeps, fighting for their thing. We have no way to get unstuck.
Mhm.
And so even in those urgent meetings, the first step is take off, like get alignment around why we're here, what we're doing,
Mhm.
and how we're going to do it and who's deciding. And then the agreements are important, which are just how we interact, right? What are
Right.
the best ways to interact? So that's, it's the same principles. Take off before
Yeah.
you fly the plane,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. It's that old saying of failing to plan is planning to
Yeah.
fail, basically.
Yeah.
If it's not clear on what the agenda is, why are we even meeting? Who are the decision makers or
Right.
key voices that should be in the room? Um, as you said, the meeting should not
Yeah.
have taken place.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the biggest trap is we meet to meet and we meet with no purpose, no objectives. And that's why we burn so much time.
Mhm.
And people, as I said earlier, they don't hate meetings. They really don't. They just hate wasting time. And most meetings are so poorly conceived, they just are guaranteed to waste people time, which is a killer to an organization's success. Absolutely a, productivity loss at the most fundamental level.
Right. And what would you say, speaking of productivity, how can they be productive in meetings when there are, let's say, so many agendas that have to be covered? What are your tips on like maybe segregating that or
Right. So there's three big types of meetings, and you're talking about one that we face a lot of. The type of meeting you're talking about is what we might call a status update meeting. I've
Mhm,
got seven agenda items. They're somewhat disparate. They're not related. I got an agenda item on, presenting this, an agenda item on something different. They're the same group of people and they're meeting on the same cadence or frequency. Maybe it's 12 people and we meet every other week or every other month, right? Those meetings, the Popper model applies differently because if I'm running a meeting like that and I have seven agenda items, I'm actually running seven separate meetings. And that's what we teach people.
mhm,
If you put an item on the agenda, what's the popper for that item? Why is it on the agenda? What are
mhm,
we trying to get done? And then I have
mhm,
to have some sort of process. Now, often we're in these meetings, let's say there are 15 people and
mhm.
seven agenda items. And as a participant, three of the seven are relevant to me. The other four, like, I have to endure this. So, what we try to help people do is treat those meetings as a chain of mini meetings where as you run the first meeting, you're going to frame it. Let's give you some context. This is why we're here. What we're trying to get done is a simple presentation so we're all aware what's
Mhm.
happening on the merger and get you an update. Here are the people of the 15 of us who need to join and come on video, right? And call them out, bring them in. Everyone else, we'd love to have you on video, but it's not really your meeting. And then you run the meeting with those folks. We talk to them about how you manage time well. There's all sorts of things you can do to run those.
Hmm.
As you leave enough time to land that meeting, right? Because you got to land the plane, that mini meeting.
Right.
And now we've got a whole new meeting. Second agenda item, another meeting. Let me tell you why we're talking about this. Here's some context behind this. This is what we're doing. And you have to have some sort of process. Here are the people who need to come into this mini meeting. Everyone else, you don't have to be on video. Timekeeper, set a countdown running timer that we can see for 12 minutes. So we cut ourselves off at 3 minutes and we can wrap up, and that meeting ends and we close that meeting. So those types of meetings, if you're going to run them that way, where you have a lot of people, where there are only three of the seven items or four of the seven, run
Hmm.
them as separate mini meetings. The people will appreciate that. Now, the meetings we're running, Haley, they're collaborative decision making meetings. It's like we're designing what our vision is, or how we're going to roll this out, or let's redesign the process, or let's figure out how to deal with this customer complaint. It is not a series of disparate agenda items. It is
Hmm.
literally a set of objectives. Maybe it's to identify the root cause, for example, of low morale,
Hmm.
right? And to reach consensus on the top three things that we need to form some sub teams around to actually start addressing those root causes. So it's a different type of meeting. Now, the third type of meeting is a presentation. And that's also the question is, do we really need a meeting for that? But sometimes you do because you need to clarify things. So that'd be one way to think about that type of meeting you're talking about.
Well, thank you for giving those insights. I think that would be really helpful for our listeners to be able to, or viewers to identify which category this type of meeting that we want to run should fall under. And of course, leave it with the experts on guiding you how to actually run those more effectively. But what would you say if there's a key stakeholder that should be in the
Mhm.
meeting, but it's like, no, I can't attend? Like, how can, you know, a person who's organizing the meeting be able to get everyone's buy-in? And.
Well, I mean, that's the realpolitik, the cultural reality of running meetings. The answer is how important are they to ultimately being able to implement the decision? If they are the fundamental decision maker, you might as well not have the meeting, right? If they're that fundamental,
Mhm.
why have the meeting? Or if you're going to have the meeting and the objective for the meeting was to make a decision around, how we were going to address this customer complaint, and they're not there, then the objective has to change to develop recommendations to provide to that leader when we can get them engaged, but we're no longer making the decision.
Mhm.
Um, so that, I mean, that's the realpolitik as a change agent. Most of the work in a high stakes meeting is
Mhm.
all the planning work, meeting with that key person, getting them aligned on the popper for why they want to have the meeting, what they're doing,
Mhm.
what their role is there, right? Because they may be the ultimate decision maker.
Right.
They need to know that because there's plenty of senior people who they don't want to make decisions, right? Because not making a decision is a decision, right? In and of itself, it means we're wasting more time because we didn't get it done here. So I can't surprise the ultimate decision maker. I have to work with them as a change agent ahead of time so they're aligned when we get there. But if there's so material to the decision, I'd say cancel the meeting, schedule it when they can be there. Otherwise, you're just going to have to meet again anyway with them.
Yeah, got it. Okay, that was very helpful. Now, in terms of the collaborative meetings that you are specializing on, could you just give us like what the simulation looks like, how that's run, just on a high level view?
Well, if you're talking about the types of meetings we're teaching people to run, they're more like workshops, right? You're a consultant. You might run a day-long retreat, right? Where you're trying to help the company articulate its strategy. And when we were consultants, we would always do this with the C team. What is vision? There might be multiple objectives. What our vision is, what are the values we want? What's the strategy to get there? It's a facilitated workshop type meeting. Those are the types of meetings we really are focusing on because this is not a course that we're teaching in meetings. It's a course in a style of leadership, fundamental leading change, projects, teams, people, consulting engagements. So the program itself It's an intensive. It's old school, right? In this day and age, everybody wants to watch videos.
Hmm.
Everyone's got their self-paced learning. Let's watch 10 2-hour videos when I can on my time, how to do something. And there's a place for that.
Right.
But we all know it doesn't really work, right? Because human beings, they don't learn watching videos. They just don't. I mean, people listen to this podcast. I listen to podcasts. If I retain 2% of it, I'm good luck, right? It's always
Yeah.
in one ear, out the other. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just that's not, you learn by doing. And
Yes.
so the program we're running is a 4-day boot camp intensive. It's all practice. There's probably in the entire 4 days, maybe there's 2.5 hours of lecture, most of it front loaded to get a few simple mental models in place. And then the
Mhm.
rest of the program is practice doing, trying things on. The second module is there's only 12 people, right? There's two instructors. This is old school. This is a boot camp.
Mhm.
And so we're going to be in two small groups for module 2 and module 4, where you're going to be on the hot seat, right? If you were in the course, you would be practicing, you would be getting feedback from the group, you would be having to give others feedback when they were practicing because we learn having to give feedback. And
Right.
so module 2 and 4 is all practice. Module 3 is practice and demonstrations. We're running these complex collaborative meetings as instructors, modeling for people what a high stakes workshop meeting looks like, takeoff, flying through landing, right? Beginning to ending. And there's a little lecture in the beginning just to get some mental models in place, but it is very Spartan. We're teaching people learn a lot of things, but there are 5 core things we're teaching. The first was that POPRA model, which is
Mhm.
so important. The second, we're teaching people the art of how to handle challenging participants. Now, we're
Right.
trying to train people how to do this when they're facilitating 2 or 3 levels above them in the organization, high stakes meetings, right? Have you ever heard the agile term HIPPO decision making by chance, Sally? It's an acronym.
No,
It came from agile.
wasn't
I think
aware of it.
it stands for the highest paid person's opinion.
Okay.
We've all been in the meeting. It's a senior person, right? It could be a
Yeah.
middle-aged white guy like me who thinks he's the smartest person on the call, has 30 years experience, doesn't
Mm.
listen very well like me. And, he scares everyone. He's quite intimidating.
Mm.
Nobody says a word. When it
Mm.
very well could have been the most junior person who maybe was a person of color, who maybe was an introvert, who maybe was speaking English as a second or third language
Mhm.
from a culture perhaps like Japan,
Mhm.
where saving face might be very important if their boss is on there who had exactly the expertise to help that senior person, the hippo, make the right decision, but the leader of the facilitated collaboration did not know understand how to hold space. So
Yeah.
those voices weighed in to help that hippo
Mm.
make the best decision. So the second of the 5 core things is how to handle hippos, how to handle a high stakes meeting with senior people. Then we teach a very elegant intervention model, which really is the art of facilitating group dynamics. The third thing, we teach people the most essential tools and techniques for holding space,
Mhm.
right? Just some very fundamental ones. And in the program, we're going to be running meetings on whiteboards and in spreadsheets, but we're not trying to teach a technology. We're just trying to teach these 5 things. The fourth of the 5 things is how to land the plane. So many meetings don't get landed, and we have major plane crashes on landing. And then the
Mhm.
fifth thing is the change agent stuff to do before the meeting, which we were talking a little bit about. So
Right.
those are the 5 core things, and the whole program is practicing because we want real skill transfer. Watching other people facilitate is not, it's like watching a video series. It's great. I saw someone do it, but we push people hard outside their comfort zone.
Mhm.
It's a boot camp, it's an intensive, so that when the program is done, there's been real skill transfer.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes. I've had clients come in all the time to observe the fourth day of the program. And if they're running a group doing agile or a project, a PMO, or maybe they'll have a bunch of change agents or,
Mhm.
a group doing Lean Six Sigma, because those are the change agents. We're training a lot of people who do things like that.
Mhm.
They'll always say to me, Evan, I love this. I want all my lean people or all my agile people and their scrum masters to know how to do this. And I always say, that's great. Let's run the program. And the less wise ones will immediately say, but I can't take them offline for this much time. 4 days. They don't have time. They're so busy. Now I'll remind them they told me earlier they're going to run 200,000 meetings today at 50% effectiveness. And they'll backpedal quickly and say, oh, you're right. It takes time to learn things. What I would like is 10 2-hour videos that my people can watch. And I've always told clients, and it pisses them off, I'm not going to do it. Go find someone else going to waste your time and money. And some of them are like, Evan, the client's always right. I know what I want. And I said, you're not right. And you absolutely know you're not right.
Mhm.
And they'll say to me, Evan, what do you mean? And I'll say, did you have kids who learn to drive? And they'll be like, yeah, of course. Right. And if they're old enough, they'll be like, of course. I'll say, can I ask you a question? Tell me you would have let your children go off, watch 10 videos on how to drive, and then say, all right, you watch the 10 videos, take the car keys, knock yourself out. Let's see what happens. Or 10 videos on how to swim and say,
Mhm.
all right, you watch 10 videos on how to swim, then push in the deep end, see what happens. You would never do that.
Right.
Everybody knows it, but in this day and age, everyone wants a quick fix. They want to
Mhm.
say we watch stuff, we learn things. It's nonsense. We all know it's nonsense. You want the real deal. You want to learn. It takes practice. It takes being put on the hot seat, and that's why people have loved the program for 33 years.
Yeah.
It's because there's real things they learn that they'll apply throughout their lives.
And it's kinesthetic learning, plus the fact
Yeah,
that 70% of communication is body language.
if not
So
more. Yeah,
if not more. So it's important to be able to see that in person and not through just videos because
yeah,
there are small cues that you may not be seeing through the lens of a camera or a screen. And sometimes energy is palpable that you have to
yeah.
be in that room to be able to see how you're able to shift the mood or the engagement of the meeting that you're actually leading if you are the
Yeah. I mean, we used to run the program for decades. Well, there would be 12 of us sitting in a room. We'd be teaching people how to facilitate, working on the walls, things you've all done, working on big post-it notes and sticky dot voting and
Mhm.
working on flip charts. And for decades, that's where the world was. Over time, WebEx came along, live meeting, GoToMeeting were some of the early ones. Of course, now Teams is the big one, Zoom for, educational environments, Google Meets, those things. And clients started saying, Evan, we're not meeting face to face anymore. And nothing replaces a face to face meeting because, to your point, we've lost so much visual information because right now you can only see, from my, middle of my arms down, and,
Mhm.
So, but for decades, we were teaching people how to do this in the room. Uh, we started moving and migrating to teach people how to do this virtually. When the pandemic hit, the world had changed entirely. And
Mhm.
now all we do is teach people complex collaborative facilitation sitting here on screens,
That's interesting.
right? Which is much harder because we've lost so much information. Now, I'll give your listeners. It sounds so obvious. I don't think I've invented this, but I'm sure I've never seen anyone else do it. But the one thing we can do virtually to hold space so people get to weigh in
Mhm.
is a very simple thing to use the chat slightly differently than
Mm.
people use it. A lot of times people let people free form in the chat, right? And so it ends up being the same people who would be talking in a room who are doing all the chatting, right? And there's like that 12 people, three or four say nothing,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah.
often the senior people or the middle-aged white guys like me who are doing all the chatting and talking. So what we teach people to do is just slow down your chats and make them simultaneous. This is what we mean. You pose a question to the group. You don't let them hit enter on the chat. You let them prepare their chat to everyone.
Mhm.
But you say, all right, here's the question I want to hear from everyone. You're not allowed to hit enter, but you raise your hand, raise reaction emoji once you've typed something in the chat, and you get the question clear and say, all right, everyone without hitting enter, prepare your chat. Now, people are sitting there, they're like, oh, all of a sudden, hand raised reaction emojis are going up. People are like, I guess I have to say something.
Mhm.
And then what we do is you just put a little banner in there, right? If you were asking them, what are your concerns about implementing this initiative? You'd have a
Mhm.
little header that said concerns about the initiative. You hit enter and you say immediately as you see that, hit the enter and you try to get them to stream all 15 things in at once. It can completely change the dynamic of only hearing from the extroverts, only hearing from the people speaking English as their
Type,
native
the type
tongue.
A's.
It's such a simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
And people, it's as silly as it sounds, it's transformative because all of a sudden the senior person is like, "Whoa, I'm hearing from people who never say anything," and they can look in the chat and say, you know, David, talk to us about what you meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the simple tools. Now we're going to be teaching people things like the digital equivalent of storyboarding or affinity diagramming, right? Or the digital equivalent of sticky dot voting, right?
Right.
Because we need some tools, but we're really trying to teach this art of leadership. And this is truly a leadership course.
Mm-hmm. Great tips, Evan. Great tips. I'm just curious, like, what difference have you seen when it comes to the effectivity of running these programs when it was in person and now it has somehow shifted into digital?
Yeah.
Do you have to like do a refresher course every now and again?
Well, the thing is, when you go to any training, including ours, if you don't have um, either your learning and development function or the people running the organization holding people accountable for implementing the things coming out of the training,
Mm-hmm.
it's a waste of money, right? Which is why we would always offer this course, ideally, starting at the senior team in the organization, work your way down so that it became part of the cultural fabric so the
Mm,
senior people can hold people accountable. Now, whether
right.
you do that virtually or face to face, training's training.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a good mechanism, even intake wise, to get the people to meet with their managers so they get clear what their development objectives are. And then on the outtake side, having come through the training, how to then integrate those in their performance appraisal, then the go getters are going to take it. It's so obvious they're going to go do it, right? Because they're just they're like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. But I'd say most people who go to trainings, especially going back into an organization where they were trained in something where no one else was, it's highly unlikely they're going to do it. Which
Mm-hmm.
is why I always was trained to use training and leadership development in particular wrapped around real change initiatives where you were launching real change teams who
Mm-hmm.
do need to facilitate change and then train these skills as part of them launching an action learning project where they were trying to move the business forward. So I've always believed leadership development should be wrapped around the business, not self-contained as training programs, although we, of course, for open enrollment programs that we run, they're just training programs because we're trying to get in and work with a senior person to use this as a vehicle for
Mm-hmm.
transforming the culture of their organization at the root level, a fundamental level.
So it's important that there's this change that is about to happen. It's more effective that way because it's kind of like transferring that transformation in real time as you help them facilitate these
Yeah,
important um
yeah, it's like you're launching strategy teams. Let's train the strategy teams how to facilitate this type of collaboration, right? It's wrap it around real business initiatives rather than just have a standalone training program. That just is a better investment of training, but it requires a sophisticated organization, which is why we always just want to train the
hmm
whole organization, like that pharma client.
hmm
We trained all their PMO members. I think like 90 people. We ran 7 programs this year.
hmm
Um, because now you have a support network where
hmm
people can start holding each other accountable for implementing things, as opposed to me going to a training, coming back to my organization and be like, oh, this is really cool. It was entertaining. I can see why it works, but no one in the culture does this, so it's never going to happen.
Are these programs also like some sort of certification, whereas you would have to assess, whether they have executed it effectively, or
Well, the truth of the matter is, first of all, we tend to train a lot of project managers. So people always ask, can I get, PMP credits with PMI? We're not PMI members, but we've been told over and over that you can get PMP credits submitting it yourself.
Mhm.
We're not certifying. This is not a train the trainer. We're not certifying people to train this. We're very good in this narrow space. So we're trying to train the change agents in a set of skills
Mhm.
that they can apply. And if they come through this, look, I've done it for 33 years. decades later, I always have people say over and over that was one of the few training programs I ever remember in my career, and it was a great one, and it helped me a lot because there's just no intellectual entertainment. It's just the pragmatics of leading change, leading teams, leading people, leading meetings, leading task forces. It's just the, if you will, one-on-one or blocking and tackling of trying to get dysfunctional human beings, and we're all dysfunctional, to come together, make decisions, get them to buy in, and
Mhm.
go implement. And there is a blueprint, there is some fundamentals that can be taught, and that's what we're doing. And it's fun. I mean, we love what we do because we know it's highly relevant, even
Mhm.
though the world's changed to these virtual meetings. It's
Mhm.
even harder and more important now because it's hard to build capability sitting on screens with people.
Yeah.
Right. And you have a limited attention span too. I mean, it's
Mhm.
like when we're in the room together, it was a different environment than sitting on screens together. And that's where the world's at. People are going to be sitting on screens. Everyone wants them back in the office, and they should, because I don't know how you're going to build cultures if people never interact. And your earlier question was, what's the difference to some degree between a training face to face and a training virtually? Here's the big difference. There's no human contact at the breaks. If we were all together in
Mm.
headquarters at a company, you're going to go to dinner with each other.
Mm.
At the breaks, or you're going to go to lunch together. You'll be in the break room finding things out. And
Yeah.
those things are really important from an informal networking perspective, which is why I think learning and development functions are very important, because it's the one place, if you bring people, fly them in worldwide and go through leadership development experiences, you build deep networks, and those deep relational networks are important. It just happens that the one thing we're teaching them has to
Mhm.
be done virtually because we're teaching them how to run group dynamics, collaboration, hybrid, when we're sitting on screens, or some of us might be in the room, but 11 people are dialing in from around the world.
Right. It's I certainly agree to that. Some important decisions are made in person and sometimes sharing over dinner.
Yeah.
The important relationships that you build are, yeah, during break time as well. You get to
Yeah. I mean,
and
yeah, it's a relational world. I mean,
present.
that relational piece. That's why everyone wants to get their employees back to work. It's just people have been like, why do I have to come back to work? I was doing so fine at home.
Mhm.
Productivity didn't suffer, but those informal networks, and I think that just the nature of dialogue, when you don't really know that, let's say you have two kids. I don't think you do, but maybe you do. And you're humanized to me. People are so much more coarse because we've been flattened by these screens, and we forget that there's things people would say, first of all, let alone on text or on the internet, they
Mm.
would never say to a person if they were sitting face to face. They would never say that, be that coarse. But that's the world. And so really we're trying to help fill what is a practical reality, which is a lot of our business is going to be transacted virtually, right?
Mhm.
Unless we're manufacturing something and we're sitting, in a manufacturing site. Right.
Yeah.
But a little knowledge work is going to, that's the great thing. You can run your job from Ireland just as easy as you could run it from Southern California, probably.
Yeah. But there will be a much deeper relationship when it's more in person. I certainly agree
Of
to that.
course.
So Evan, looking ahead, are there any exciting projects and programs that Terry and Schwartz Associates would be running by 2026?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we ran about 23 of these programs this year. I think when we met before, at 60, well, about to be 62 next month, I'm done with consulting. I'm too old. I just love training people. So we run these training programs. Now, again, as I said, I'm trying to work and partner to use this as a piece of cultural transformation, not a training program. But we do run open enrollment programs. I got one in January, has a few seats, and your listeners are welcome to reach out to me. If they're from a new client, they can look at our website. I mean, they can name any price. I just want someone to try it at a new client because I know they'll tell whoever their boss is,
Mhm.
go run these programs. So we run open enrollment programs. I have one in January. And that's what we'll be doing this year. I have a well, I do have a few face-to-face programs. I have a client who likes to run the face-to-face program
Mhm.
because of the team building piece, even though all the meetings their people are running are hybrid, but
Mm.
they like the relational piece. So in many ways, that program, I don't think it's as good a program as our virtual program because it's not as targeted
Mm.
for the challenges people face, which is running hybrid meetings, right?
Right.
But they like to do it because, people are together for 3 days
Yeah.
and, there is something to be said. Maybe the relational side of it is more important than the technical skill building per se. They get a lot out of that program. It's an
Yeah.
awesome program. It's just if you're not going to be running face-to-face meetings, why are you getting trained how to facilitate complex face-to-face meetings if that's
Yeah.
not the meetings you're going to run?
Where's the practice in that
Yeah.
sense? That's quite interesting. Now, this program that you were talking about that you will be doing next month, next year, uh, where people can just drop in, or how can they?
Well, look, we charge and we charge, yeah, I think it's a reasonable amount. But as I was saying, I will deeply discount. Like if someone reaches out to me, it's like, hey, you know, I think I can talk my boss into spending this on money. Can you do that for a first seat? I'll
Mhm.
knock over 75% off the price of seat. I'm not trying, I'm in this to find partners. I'm a small firm. I'm not looking to be this giant, well, I'm not going to build a giant training company. I'm trying to find some people who share our values, who understand the importance of collaboration, who see this as part of a vehicle to cut and drive right to cultural transformation. And that's all I want is so that they may be running a group doing agile, they may be running a group doing, running a PMO, they may be
Mhm.
doing Lean Six Sigma, they may be having a group of change agents. That's what I'm trying to do is train the change agents. But the
Mhm.
open enrollment programs are marketing programs. That's why I discount the seats and I said, just come try it. Because what I'm trying to do is get them to go back and say, let's train all our agile people in this, or let's train all our project managers. Because that's what I would like to do is make
Mhm.
it a change intervention, a cultural intervention, not a training program. I'm too small to run training programs.
And is there a name for this marketing course that you will be
Well, we call we we
enrolling?
call it yeah, we call it collaborative leadership, and the subheader is it's a virtual immersion program, which but it effectively, I mean, I know on the show notes if you put our website in there, they can look up
We
Evan
will,
Unger on
definitely.
LinkedIn and then click to my website. It'll show the program. But yeah, it's collaborative leadership, but really you can think about leadership. You and I probably have read so many books and articles in our years, me more than you, because I'm go back a little further than you. And there's many ways we might think about leadership. Uh, One of the simplest ways, and this is the way we frame it, is just think about our leadership on a continuum, where on one extreme, Haley, you could run a meeting. Let's say you were trying to get a group to decide what the strategy is. Let's pick that. Just an example. And you could be the expert. You could be the expert in the business, the expert of the business environment, the expert in strategy, and you bring the group together. And as the expert, you are presenting your decision, what you think the strategy is to the group, and the group is passive, right? You're the expert. You're deciding for the group and telling them this is what the strategy is. Nothing wrong. There are times you may be the legitimate expert. That's one extreme.
Mhm.
Now, on the other extreme, which is where we're working, is what we call being 100% focused on the process for how the group's going to work. So you are neutral on what the ultimate strategy is, even though you may have very strong opinions what the strategy should be. When you're
Mhm.
on the far side of that side of the continuum, you remain neutral and you never tell the group your expertise on what the strategy is, but you are an expert in getting other people to collaborate, an expert in POPRA, an expert in all the tools and techniques we'd be teaching, an expert in process facilitation. And that's the art of leadership. And it's not I mean, the real world, we're in the middle of the continuum, right? There are times we're going to offer our expertise to groups and make decisions for group, but we want to have had the most robust collaborative conversation where everyone got to weigh in. So even if I'm the ultimate decision maker,
Mm-hmm.
the group has given me all the answers I need to make the most informed decision. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, leadership really is on a continuum. And when I'm the expert and I decide for the group, the advantages are obviously it's a heck of a lot quicker. I didn't need to listen to the other 10 people. I got my way. There's an advantage. Now, if I'm a skillful leader, what do we want? We always want the best decision with maximum buy-in. And if I never ask the group their thoughts,
Yeah.
A, I'm not going to make the best decision because I had 10 other people who could have helped me make a better decision, tunnel vision, blind spots. And
Mhm.
B, they're not going to buy in because I decided for them. Now,
Yeah.
those advantages flip and disadvantages when I'm skilled at working as a neutral, 100% process focused leader, which
Mhm.
is if you're good at this, and this is a big if because people are never trained in this, you're going to help groups make better decisions, more creative decision, more synergistic decision, and you're going to get a ton more buy-in.
Mhm.
Now, people say, Evan, there's a disadvantage of letting the group work it out for themselves. And I say, what's the disadvantage? And they say it takes longer. And I chuckle. I say, yes, in the beginning, of course. We're all dysfunctional human beings. To get 10 people to agree on anything is a minor leadership miracle. But it doesn't take longer in the long run because you were solving root causes, not symptoms. It was the right decision from the very beginning. There's no rework cycles, reworking what was the bad decision in the first place. And because they decide, they own it, it gets implemented, it goes so much faster. The other disadvantage is it is much harder to know how to open up a conversation in a group to get them to decide,
Yeah.
inquire amongst themselves to make the best. So the disadvantage, it takes a tremendous amount of skill. The other side of the continuum, where you're the expert deciding, is presentation skills. Very important. Communication skill has nothing to do with leadership, though. It's a communication skill set.
Yeah. I resonate with that a lot because as you are running this for like over 3 decades now, how important it is to have that collaboration because that's the essence of the team,
Yeah.
being able to see each other's blind spots, and maybe that's your strengths where my opportunities are, and then we can make a better and more well-informed decision when it comes to changing a certain procedure or
Yeah.
policy within the organization. So, what a masterclass in leadership, running effective meetings, and the core importance of how this impacts the changes within the organization. Evan, thank you for sharing your 3 decades of expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure, Helly. Thank you so much for having me, and I wish you all the best. And if your listeners want to reach out to me, they can go to my LinkedIn page and track me down there.
Absolutely. One of my biggest takeaways really is simple. It's not enough to learn, it's important to also learn how to do it and just do it. Evan, thank you for challenging a lot of us to be better leaders and for joining the Spotlight series. We'll definitely link all the information that Evan has shared with us so that if you need to get in touch with him and want to be able to experience this as you think this has helped you in so many ways, definitely check the show notes. And then if this conversation helped you think differently about your business, the best way to support the show is to do two things. One is share this episode with one colleague or a friend or your boss. Or number two, hit subscribe right now so you never miss the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to Spotlight Series. We'll see you again next time.